Do you trust me? It's a good answer. It's a great way to start. Well, here's a guy about 8 years ago. Smart, confident guy, giving a big talk in Scotland, and he was an ass. Here's another guy that I know pretty well. This is about 3 years ago. He's in Dubai giving a big talk, and he was an ass too. Werner Erhard founded EST, and he said to me a few years ago that about every 3 years, he looks back at the person that he was and realizes he was an ass. For me, it takes about 5. I guess I'm just a slow learner in this category. But I know that in another year or two, I'm going to look back at this guy and think he was an ass. Hopefully the next time it'll be a little bit faster. Only if we're open to the possibility of hearing we're wrong, or being an ass in my case, can we truly learn? Can we truly be present? Can we truly be here now? Now, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand my foolishness. I've researched the topic very, very well, and my foolishness is something that I can trust. But why should you trust me? Maybe it's because for the last 20 years, I've helped researchers move their research forward faster. I love research. As my family would attest to, I always question facts. I question norms. And I love how research helps solve hard problems. In my job, I get to spend a lot of time with really smart people like Gene Fama, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2013, or Richard Horton, who runs The Lancet, or Emily Marcus from Cell Press. Just really smart people. I also love the scientific method, the idea that we can actually take some research, take some ideas, and create knowledge from that. And I think that spreading that knowledge, sharing that knowledge as quickly as possible helps and benefits all of us. Now, I love to share. I love to share. I love sharing research, I love sharing knowledge, I love sharing experiences. To me, sharing is what makes life worth living. It makes it spectacular. Now, we created an online, innovative community where 400,000 authors share their research for free in biology and economics and medicine and 50 other disciplines. And that sharing becomes an important part of who we are. And the point is that, the most important point is that the researchers have come to trust us. Trust us with their work. Trust us with their babies. And in many cases, their work is more important than their real babies. Now, the research that I'm reading now is telling me that there's this terrible, terrible degradation of trust. The 2019 Edelman Trust Barometer, it's an annual survey done globally to measure the attitudes of trust in business and government and NGOs and the media, showed a historically high 16 percentage point gap between the trusting, informed public and the far more skeptical mass population. So what it's telling us is that the less information you have, the greater your lack of trust. Arthur Brooks is the president of a conservative think tank, and he recently wrote that we just can't disagree anymore. No longer can I win an argument. I actually have to vilify those with opposing opinions to the point of worthlessness. He calls it our culture of contempt. Rand Corporation recently came out with a report called Trust Decay, where they talk about the changes as relates to facts and their analysis in America today. They talk about the disagreement of facts and the analysis of those facts, the interpretation of those facts. They talk about a blurring of the line between opinion and fact. They talk about this increase in the noise and resulting influence of opinion and personal experience. And one of the most concerning things is they talk about a declining trust in factual sources. Now, trust is this really weirdly interesting, tricky concept. I believe in this, I believe in that, someone or something. And this common definition felt good to me. Felt good to me for a very long time. I mean, I'm certainly no Noah Webster, but that view has changed. I no longer feel comfortable with this definition. And that's why I'm here today. So what if we took the subjective concept of trust and made it objective? Now, I'm an accountant. I know, hard for me to believe some days too. But if we try to think of this subjective concept objectively, there's no better ways to do that than accounting terms, right? But let's start with Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey defines trust as an emotional bank account. Let's take it one step further. So let's start with an asset, like a bank account. Deposits and withdrawals, the foundation for all relationships. I make a deposit when I remember your birthday. I make a withdrawal when I forget to bring home the milk. But the balance can grow over time. And next, let's talk about liability, or potential liability. You know, like that cliff that if you're not careful, you could fall off of. I no longer feel comfortable. I'm not sure I even trusted at all social networks. My friend Josh Greenberg from the Sloan Foundation refers to this as the creepiness index. Where does a particular site or app fall on that index on any given day? And finally, goodwill, right? This is the intangible value all around assets minus liabilities. Customers and brand can increase your goodwill. Declining cash flows and competition can reduce it. And reputation can kind of move it either way. In research, goodwill is the trust one researcher places on the work of another. The standing upon the shoulders of giants, as Isaac Newton once said. But overall, trust is the ground upon which communication works. Without it, we can't hear one another. I'll tell you what you can trust. You can trust that, because that's a cool car. And I know it's a cool car, because when I was growing up, my buddy, my best friend Tommy's older brother, Paul, had that cool car, and Paul was cool. Now, I trusted my parents in the 70s when I was growing up. They were all-knowing, at least back in the 70s. My parents told me two things. My parents told me never to get in cars with strangers and don't meet people online. Okay, the second one is what I tell my children. Now I actually go online to meet strangers, to pay them to get into their car. The cool thing about ride-sharing apps is they get us there safely, and then we get to rate the driver. We like to rate restaurants and hotels. So how many of you know your rating? Oh, I see by a few faces, a few scratches of the head that actually some of you don't realize that you're being rated by the driver too. Yeah, it's literally a two-way rating street. I was in Amsterdam with some colleagues recently, and we started talking about the ratings, and many of them didn't realize that they were being rated also. Some of them weren't really happy about it. Started questioning what it said about them. What's the value? What's the trustworthiness of this number? What are the consequences? Some were blaming, biased Uber drivers or for some sort of bad rating. But at the end of the day, They were worried that the number was not in context and that it would have a negative effect on them. Now, China is all in on quantifying trust with technology. They've created the social credit score. How many of you have heard of it? Okay, about half. The social credit score is a system that was created because, and I'm going to quote, because keeping trust is glorious, breaking trust is disgraceful. Now, this system, which should be fully implemented by 2022, will manage the rewards and punishment of its citizens. You may not be able to fly a plane or take a high-speed train or even stay in a nice hotel if you're late on your taxes. Your children may not be able to get into a private school, or you may not get a special project at work because of some other socially unacceptable behavior, as defined by the government that day. You could be walking across the street and be fined on your mobile phone immediately when the traffic camera's facial recognition software catches you jaywalking. This is not science fiction. This is real, and it's happening now. Google it. No, wait till the other speakers are finished first. I mean, we trust search results, right? Like we trust social networks. Kara Fisher, when she was interviewing Mark Zuckerberg last year, got into a little bit of a debate because he was arguing that limiting global reach might put American values at risk. So if we don't let social networks control our communications, then other companies or countries are going to start to control them? Is that our choice now? All-powerful social networks or nefarious foreign entities? In that RAND report, Trust Decay, they talk about the declining trust in factual sources, and they deal with the consequences. Alienation, political paralysis, erosion of social discourse, and uncertainty. What about news as a factual source? What's happened to news? You know what's happened to news? We have fake news now. Anybody who holds an opposing opinion, that news is fake. And the scary part is we're now killing journalists at an alarmingly increasing rate because they're holding and sharing dissenting opinions. In an area like scholarly research that I know a little bit about, we have a reproducibility crisis. And we have perverse incentives that some researchers use to cheat. They falsify results. They fake reviewer reports. We spend a fair bit of time just trying to make sure that they don't inflate their download counts for their research papers, because it would undermine the trust that we've created in our system, in our network. Now, fake news is scary, but nowhere near as scary as fake science. Potentially, and I say this hesitantly, but potentially the greatest risk we have is the increasing distrust in science. We are still arguing about climate change? How did we get to a point where anti-vaxxers are using fake news and bad science to support their position? To blame Big Pharma? Truth is not always what we want to hear. But seriously, how did we get measles back? well, we've been playing with our mobile phones. Technology has undermined the ground underneath us. It has washed away the institutions that we trusted in to communicate, even to believe. We've all been amazed and horrified by the revelations within the Catholic Church. The Tricycle, which is a Buddhist review, recently wrote about the grim accounts within that faith. They even have a hashtag, #MeTooGuru. Now, in our interconnected digital society, authority figures can't evade scrutiny like they could before. With a push of a button on your mobile phone, social networks can bring the walls down. The trust in those institutions is gone. That genie has left the building. Now, the problem is that we need trust to exist, to be successful as a society. And that's a hard problem. The hard thing about hard problems is they're hard, but they're also spectacular because they challenge us. As I get older, I truly appreciate Alan Kay's quote that perspective is worth 80 IQ points. So you can choose to look at this digital revolution as part of the problem or part of the solution. I choose solution. We would not have Me Too or Me Too Guru without it. Now, in these times of uncertainty, you certainly can take a populist step back into dogmatism, conspiracy theories, or fundamentalism. You can listen to someone who has the answer. We see too many people retreating into their small groups, speaking the same language, and we're only going to see more of it. Now, when I start to think about these things, I start to try to think about solutions. And I think editorial may be the path forward. Journalists have long had to deal with ambiguity, tricky sources, and confusion. One of the tenets of journalism is skepticism. And one of their rules is when your mom tells you she loves you, check it out. We all need to be responsible for understanding the context in which we extend trust. And all of us need to check it out ourselves. My favorite quote in journalism and trust is from Lewis Herron, the foreign correspondent. And he said, when you sit down to talk to someone, the first thing you should be thinking is, why is this bastard lying to me? The German media analyst Bernhard Porkschen wrote that we need to transform from a digital society to an editorial society. What he meant by that was, be a proper journalist. Double check your resources before publishing. Check and be skeptical of every opinion, including your own. And always listen to the other side. I like this a lot because it puts us back into control and it shows us a path forward. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but no one is going to come and fix this problem for us. We better start trusting in ourselves. You need to be responsible. You need to read the science. You need to check the opinions. And you need to be powerful with your trust. But don't take my word for it. Take your own. Thank you.